Hello, and welcome back to Annihilation Audio. Today, we're going to go through how to create key spikes without any kind of paid plugins. This was a technique I found out about a couple months ago, and you actually saw that in action with the Heart of Eve mix that I did a while back. And I'll leave a link to that in the description below. So after you're done seeing how I made them, then you can go see how they were used in an actual mix. But until then, let's get right into it. The track I have pulled up is called Triangles, and that was the winning track on the team I was on for the URM International Collab Smash competition. And quick disclaimer, that the mix that won, the mix and the master, was done by our teammate Ruben all the way in Spain. So the version of the song that you're going to hear in this video was done by myself for practice and for the video. So as much fun as it would be to say that this was the winning session, it was not. But one day, one day we'll get there. So real fast, we're going to create some key spikes for the kick. And just upon looking at it, we see that there are some spaced out parts. Now we have some faster parts. And that's very important to keep in mind because we want to dial it in as best as we can to account for all of those. So the first thing we're going to do is create a track. We're going to call it the kick spike. You can call it whatever you want. As long as it's an instrument track, then you're good to go. So I'm going to move that right under the kick. So once we create the key spikes, we can see how well they line up. Second, I'm going to hit F5, and then I'm going to put our sampler onto the instrument track. After that, we need the sound of a kick spike, or key spike, I should say. So I'm going to drag one in, and I'm going to move it to C3. And now whenever I hit that note, we have the sounds of a key spike. So now the question is, what do we have to do to get the audio to basically transform into MIDI? Well, there are a couple ways you could do that. One of them is up here, where we could literally drag the audio track up and then back down, and then that does it into MIDI. But it's not my favorite technique for extremely fast parts, and also it doesn't cover the entirety of the song for whatever reason. But this uses a transient detector, and I do use this technique if I'm going to sample reinforce. But the one I'm going to show you is where we're going to hit F3. And I'm going to do this on the kick bus. We're going to add a gate. And we're going to want the fastest attack, the fastest release, and the fastest holds. We also want the look ahead option on. And we want to click this button to activate the trigger section. And you'll notice that it's activating at C3, which is exactly why I moved the key spike sample to C3. Because if these don't line up, this technique doesn't work. And lastly, I'm going to click on the instrument track we just created, hit F4, and on this in section right here, we're going to hit gate. So whenever the gate opens, it is going to create a MIDI note or trigger a MIDI note. And now what we've told it to do is to send that MIDI note to the kick spike track. And it's going to send a C3 MIDI note to that track, which in turn will activate the sampler, creating a MIDI key spike. So that's as about advanced as it gets in terms of this technique. So now what we're going to do is we're going to play with the open knob right here and see at what points the gate catches all of the notes. So let's go ahead and do that. So I always start with it completely closed and then bring the sensitivity down. Then I have to watch this fast section right here. All right, it caught these 3. Then as a final test, we're going to record this. And this is how we're going to get the MIDI onto the track. And then we'll do a test after, and you'll see exactly just how accurate this technique is. All right, so from a distance, I saw a single line right here, and I thought it didn't catch it, but it did. So let's continue. Now let's make sure it catches this fast part. So this is the interesting part about it, is that only 1 note was laid down, but I heard 3 key spikes. So let's zoom into it a little bit. And sure enough, we have 3 key spikes. And because this is a particularly fast section, this is something we have to watch out for. So an easy way to fix that is to just cut these a little shorter. And we can see they line up. And we just have to move all these back to C3. 3 notes, 3 key spikes. Now the best way to test how accurate these are is we are going to set the gate back to normal or default settings. And then we're going to sidechain it to the kick. I'm sorry, to the kick spike. And then there's a duck feature. We are going to enable that. And what that's going to do is every time there's a key spike here in the MIDI, it is going to duck the kick audio. So basically, if we hear any kick not being ducked, then these MIDI notes are not accurate enough. So let's listen real fast. Listen for any kick. I'll loop it real fast. Bypassed. I don't hear a single kick in there. I don't hear any remains of any bass, any click, nothing. Not too bad for a gate, huh? It's a stock gate also. So now let's do the test with the rest of this that we already recorded. Yeah, so there I heard maybe 4 or 5 instances where I heard part of the kick. But for all the notes that are in this section, I will absolutely go in to edit 4 or 5 of those. That is not a big deal. And there is a way I could cheat and do this, because this is not a real kick. So I know that these were MIDI, so I know they are 100% on time. But if you're doing this with a real drum and a real drummer, it's going to be a little different. So the other part of that is, what you could do is find a good setting that works for the entire song, play the song once, and set up separate spikes for kick, snare, toms, all that stuff, and then just let it go. But if you want to be really accurate, then what you'll want to do is basically play with the settings here as the song goes on. That way you're making it more sensitive, less sensitive, stuff like that. So let's see what we can do with this fast part. If I can figure out why the volume disappeared. Oh, it's because the trigger was off. So the one thing to be careful about whenever you have super fast sections like this is if this is set too low, you're going to get some double misfires. Take a listen. So like with that, you can hear how fast this can detect some notes. But like, that's not even close to the amount of notes that are in this. Now, if we set it up appropriately, I think -6, -7 around there was a good mark. I'll give it a little more time. Actually bring it down a little bit. Looks a lot more reasonable. Then if we do the test, activate the sidechain, duck it. So I heard some near the ends. Yeah. But as far as a free technique, that is really, really good. So now let's do that for some other parts in the song. Now let's go with the chorus. Turn on the sidechain, enable the duck, and let's see what happens. Oh, I forgot that whenever you sidechain it back, you want the original settings here. Because if you take a look, we're allowing for 0.05 milliseconds in terms of creation, 0.05 milliseconds, 10 millisecond release, and a 1 millisecond holds. Now, when we're sidechaining, we want the gate to open at a certain point. That's what the key is. It doesn't matter too much when it closes because we can always control that with this. But these settings are going to be longer than they were in creation, and that's to our benefit because we don't want it to be so sensitive to the point that it was when we were writing these. We want it to open when it's supposed to and then kind of hold the note an appropriate amount of time. So now let's listen. And we don't hear anything. So that's basically what the technique is. And as far as for people who don't have Studio One, you may say, it's a great trick, but I don't want to switch DAWs. Well, good news is you don't have to. Because one thing that Reaper has are these downloadable free plugins. So they have compressor, gates, EQ, delay, and it's the gates that you want to go for. Because you can see, you can make the pre-open, attack, hold, release, all down to 0 milliseconds, which my gate couldn't even do. You can even low pass it to make it more sensitive. Same with the high pass. But the one that will set it apart is the sends MIDI, and then you can control which channel in your DAW that it gets sent to. And even on top of that, has the duck feature. So if you don't have Studio One, you can Google Reaper plugins, and you'll be able to download this for free. And that's how you can do it on literally any DAW. So that's what the trick is. So, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.